everyone, welcome back to Let's Talk. My name is John, and today we're here to talk about the 1976 thriller film, Marathon Man. And we're here today to talk about its brand new 4K Blu-ray that just came out from Kino Lorber. But before we dive into that, if you are a fan of 4K Blu-ray reviews, movie reviews, some tech and game reviews along the way, then this is the channel for you, and nothing helps this channel out more than by you liking this video and subscribing to the channel. So Marathon Man was originally released on October 8th, 1976. It's directed by John Schillinger, and it stars Dustin Hoffman, Lawrence Oliver, and Roy Scheider, amongst many great actors that appear in this film. And this film is written by William Goldman, and it is based on his 1974 novel of the same name. And this film follows Babe, Dustin Hoffman's character. He's a graduate student in New York City, and he's training to run a marathon, doing something that I just could never imagine doing because I despise running more than anything in the world. It's never fun for me. I've never enjoyed it. But this guy wants to do it, and he talks about how much he has to power through the pain to complete this, and you see it on his face, man. The running is definitely killing him. That's a hard thing to do. I'm not very jealous of him, but it does work in his favor later in this film because this film follows him. He ends up falling into something that he could have never imagined, although he should have been a little bit more self-aware because his brother, Doc, played by Roy Scheider in this film, and his father happen to be involved in some pretty shady dealings with the government. Their father actually ended up killing himself, and that really does weigh on Dustin Hoffman's character's mind. I think he understands what happened, but I don't think he's come to terms with what's happened. He's in complete denial about it. He's even in denial about what his brother is. He thinks his brother is this big businessman for an oil corporation, and he doesn't really kind of put the pieces together that his brother might be more than that. As the film starts to progress, in the very beginning of this movie, we see two men in this high speed in the middle of the city, which would never happen today because there is just no room, if you've ever been in the city, for this kind of shenanigans where these two old men are involved in a road rage incident with them both dying, and this comes to the attention of a Mr. Zell. A Mr. Zell who's right now living in South America. His brother, we saw in the beginning of this movie, taking diamonds out of a safety deposit box, and he basically uses those diamonds, they're old stolen diamonds, because Zell happens to be an old Nazi. One of the worst, apparently, and these are diamonds that he was stealing off of Jewish people at Auschwitz. So these are all stolen diamonds that he's using to fund himself so he doesn't get caught and have to answer for his crimes. So he's basically a monster, this guy Zell. But not only is he a monster, but after his brother dies, he decides that he can't trust anyone. He's got to do it himself. That's it. He's had enough. He's, already an old man. He's been trusting these people for years, but he's like, can't do it anymore. So one of those couriers who actually helps him get the money to him and sell the diamonds and everything is Roy Scheider's character. And that's what he really does for a living, and that's apparently what his father did for a living. But in their attempts to bring these back, unfortunately now, Zell has decided I gotta kill off all my couriers, and that includes Roy Scheider's character. And Roy Scheider's character, he beats one man in one of the most brutal scenes, especially for a 1970s film, and a given 1970s, that's when we really started to get darker with films. The Hays Code was gone, and we were able to do these things, but man, this scene was bloody, and I've always wondered why no one ever puts their hand up in front of a wire when someone's going to choke their neck. You never really get to sell how powerful a wire is when people kill people with it. I've never actually seen it be actually that dangerous. This is the first time I've ever thought to myself, that really could kill someone. I never thought about it. I always thought it was not as sharp as it is, but it's a really sharp wire, because when Roy Scheider puts his hand in front of the wire and his hand just starts bleeding immediately. Again, great effects, especially for this time. This movie's almost 50 years old now, and I really think they did some incredible work with these scenes. The score in this movie is also just awesome. I think it really helps to build the tension, because this film is very tense. It's definitely a thriller through and through. Now, the plot of this movie, like I was telling you guys, with the diamonds and Zell coming back to collect his diamonds in New York City, that just stuff it's all well and good, but I really think that the character development in this movie is what I really think is the driving force of this film. And I'm not a big Dustin Hoffman fan. Never been. I just always find his acting style not to just click well with me. I do enjoy All the President's Men and, other movies along those lines, but I'm just not a huge fan of his. I've never sought out a Dustin Hoffman role, but Dustin Hoffman is perfect in this. This is where his jittery speaking patterns and, the stuff that he's really good at being he really portrays scared and fear very well with his face. He does some great face acting, and that is really shown in this film. I think he does an amazing job. But Lawrence Oliver, who ends up getting an Academy Award nomination for this film, he's just scary as a Nazi. Like, you believe it. Like, he is just... Like, the scene where he ends up stabbing Roy Scheider in front of the red DNA looking thing in New York City, which I don't know if it's real, and I live not too far from New York City, so I don't know if that's real, but it did look beautiful. You know, when he stabs him and he's pretending to be this scared old man only to put something in his gut and just let him run off, you know, and like basically stumble into his brother's apartment. And then he's just like, oh, well, he had to go there for something. Now he's torturing Babe with those dentist instruments. Man, you know, it really does get under your skin, and it really sells that this guy is a monster who you just want to see die. Like, all the stuff that he's done and gotten away with to this point, you know what? It's about time that he answers for his crimes, which builds up to a very satisfying conclusion, in my opinion, and doesn't betray Dustin Hoffman's character in any way, and I really do like the way that they ended this film. I think it really did build to a nice conclusion. I enjoyed the ending of this movie. I enjoyed this film throughout completely. Now, there are some plot holes throughout this film that did kind of bother me. There's also stuff that seemed very dated for the time. Even like, you know, one thing I've noticed about a lot of 1970s films, because I've been watching a lot more lately, is they just don't seem to know when they want to end a scene. They just drag them out a little too long. And then there's scenes where they felt like they should have extended it, given us some more information. Like the first hour of this movie, you really don't get any information, which I appreciate. I like letting the mystery unwind. But there are scenes, especially the road rage scene, where I felt like there could have been some cuts in there to help the pacing. Although it's very entertaining, it's just, you dragged it on too long. And then there's scenes in here I feel like that you could have extended that would have definitely added to the plot. But the acting by everybody in this movie is phenomenal. It's a very tight screenplay. It tells a great story. It's a thriller through and through. It's so tense. If you ever want to give anyone an example of what a classic thriller should be, I really think Marathon Man is one of those movies, because the tension is just going throughout the entire film. And once that tension is relieved, the movie just ends. So it's really just a very tense film from beginning to end. Even if I think that first hour, I think could have used a little work. Once we finally get into that second hour of this film, it really does take off and turns out to be a really good movie. One that I really enjoyed, and one that's going into the permanent rotation for me. It took me this long to catch up to it. I'm not going to miss out anymore. But if you're like me and you've never seen this film before and you want to check it out, maybe this Kino Lorber 4K is for you. So let's talk about that right now. So Kino Lorber put out this 4K for Marathon Man February 28, 2023. And this is a brand new 4K transfer from an original 35mm camera negative. And one thing I always say about Kino Lorber that I love is that they preserve classic films. Marathon Man is very much a classic film of the 70s. It's just not up there with like The Godfathers or Taxi Driver of the world. So this could be one of those films that people do forget about as time goes on. And Kino Lorber preserves these films. That's why I'm a huge fan of Kino Lorber, is that they preserve classic, older films so that they don't get forgotten. I really consider myself somewhat of a film historian who wants to follow everything from the beginning of film to the present day. I just always been obsessed with film and the history of film, and I love that Kino Lorber wants to preserve that as well. And actually, for Marathon Man, Dustin Hoffman plays a historian, so you know what? It kind of ties in with Kino Lorber. I thought that was pretty interesting, even if I know that was completely unintentional. Just something that I noticed. And anyway, you get your standard Kino Lorber packaging here with their classic slip covers that I always love, and I always love the bind on the side of this. How it could just look uniform on your shelf. I keep all my Kino Lorber 4Ks together because of that. I love how they look just side by side. You pop it off, you get the same artwork underneath, and Kino Lorber does not mess around and do reversible art, and they also don't do individual disc design. Kino Lorber sticks with all their stuff being pretty much uniform. Kino Lorber kind of reminds me of Criterion Light, where they want everything to be uniform, but they never go outside their box. They never do anything too special to really like cater to the collector. Everything just stays very uniform, which I can appreciate because it does help to build that Kino Lorber brand that I really do love. And I don't think I've ever said a bad thing about Kino Lorber here on the channel, but I gotta be 100% honest with you guys. The visuals on this 4K, pretty disappointing to me. Overall, I've seen Kino Lorber do some incredible transfers to 4K for 50s films, 40s films. You know, I've seen them do 70s films. I've seen them do films in the 2000s. But out of every Kino Lorber 4K I have seen, I gotta admit, I think Marathon Man is probably the worst of those 4K transfers. Maybe I overhyped myself expecting this to look just gorgeous. but unfortunately it just doesn't. There are sub scenes with Dolby Vision and the HDR10 all look phenomenal, but then there's other scenes where everything looks flat, muddy, and grainy. Even in the same scene, like in the early part of this movie, we spend a lot of time on a road rage scene, and they're driving through New York City, and they'll change cameras, and when they change cameras, it'll go from looking pretty damn good to like having like this red tint to this. And they do this about 3 times in the film, where they change cameras mid-scene. You see it again later in the film, where Roy Schneider's walking up this like big, beautiful set of stairs. They change cameras in the middle of the scene, and again, it goes from looking very cool to looking very warm in the exact same scene, and that could just be extremely jarring, especially if you're paying attention the entire time. You're going to notice it almost immediately, and it's just like that throughout, where it's very scene to scene. Some scenes look good, some scenes look muddy, some scenes look grainy. I don't understand how that happens through an entire film where it's just extremely uneven, because when this does look good, it looks good. Perfect example of that is when Roy Schneider gets stabbed in front of that big giant DNA looking thing or stair looking thing in New York City. When he gets stabbed, you know, it looks, that red thing behind them just pops off your screen, and I'm like, okay, this is what the whole 4K should look like. And there's plenty of good examples of good scenes throughout this, and it is a much better 4K over the Blu-ray that's in here, because I believe the Dolby Vision HDR. Now, the Dolby Vision does do a little bit more work than the HDR10. I thought the Dolby Vision did look better. And just to be fair, this still is a 1976 film, so source material could be a thing. It just was weird that it was so scene to scene, where it actually felt a little bit jarring for me. That was the only thing that kind of threw me off, because it does look better than the Blu-ray. I haven't seen any previous edition of this film. That Blu-ray in here, though, is this same version of the 4K, just compressed down into a 1080p disc. So I don't think it's like a previous Blu-ray release. This is a new Blu-ray release that is packed in here, although you cannot buy that Blu-ray separately. You have to get this 4K to get that Blu-ray, which is a little strange, because Kino Lorber does sometimes just release the Blu-ray. But the 4K is noticeably brighter than the Blu-ray. Some scenes look a lot better, like the early explosion in this film, where Roy Schneider's character was attempted to be killed the first time with the bomb exploding. That looked great on the 4K. On the Blu-ray, it just didn't pop at all. It would look just very flat. The Blu-ray throughout the entire thing looked very flat, even though it's a new scan. That should just tell you the power of Dolby Vision 4K resolution and HDR10, depending which HDR you have available to you. I think they both do about the same amount of work. The Dolby Vision is slightly better, and it's, I mean, I guess it's noticeably better, but it's not a huge upgrade to where I'm like telling you have to go out and get a designated 4K player for Dolby Vision to see Marathon Man, because you absolutely do not. So I was just very disappointed with the visuals throughout. I definitely expected more, just because I feel like Kino Lorber has one of the best studios that does their transfers for them. I don't know if they do it in-house or they send it out, but usually their transfers are some of the best. I think that's what usually carries them over, because their extras are usually very limited, and that's exactly the same thing here. You just get one new audio commentary track is the only unreleased new extra that's on here. Everything else is just the same. You get a really old actual making of Marathon Man from the 70s, which looked awesome, by the way. I mean, it looks bad visually, but I like that. It's like a little nostalgia trip, just seeing what the world was like back then from regular people. But other than that, you also get another looking back documentary, and then you get like 10, this is what Kino Lorber does that drives me nuts. They put like 10 TV spots in here and trailers and all that stuff. And you know, it's 2023. That's just really just to pack it in and tell you we put all these extras on it without doing any effort to do it. So they do that on almost all their 4Ks, and usually I forgive that as long as the disc is good, but I just wasn't in love with the disc. And the audio tracks are a DTS HD 5.1 and a 2.0 mono track. Now on the 4K disc, it's going to start in its original mono track, but on the Blu-ray disc, it starts in the 5.1. So it's a little bit strange that you would think they would both start on the same track. So on the 4K disc, if you want to listen to that 5.1, you have to switch it. And I listened to the 4K on the 5.1 yesterday, and then this morning I checked out the mono track, and the 5.1 is overall awesome. I loved it. There is barely any issues. There's one little issue. Again, I'll go back to the same scene with Roy Schneider getting stabbed. When he gets stabbed, he makes this noise, and on the 5.1, it's much louder and almost sounds ADR'd, and the mono track doesn't have that issue, so it's kind of weird, and it's like one or two little instances where that happens. Overall, for a DTS HD 5.1, I actually thought they did a damn good job on it. It's very good. I think the audio track is the best thing on this 4K. It impressed me, you know. I didn't expect it to be that good. I've been watching the Rocky movies, and I haven't been that impressed with their audio tracks. They've been good, but nothing too great. And I really felt like for a DTS track, this was a great track. I was pretty surprised by it. You know, the score in this movie, I said before, is phenomenal. and they made sure to have the levels correct for the most part, except for one or two minor instances that you will notice. Overall, though, very solid track throughout. So overall, like I said, you know, it's still an upgrade, and I can imagine it's definitely an upgrade over previous Blu-rays. I imagine a lot of the issues that I'm seeing visually are source material issues. It just doesn't fit in what I've seen from Kino Lorber previously. I go into these expecting to be the highest of quality 4Ks for visuals. Usually Kino Lorber never disappoints me in that department, but for the first time I can honestly say I was pretty disappointed with the visuals, just because of the fact when you go in the same scene and you change cameras and you can't clean that up, it could just be jarring for the viewer, that's all. And it happens a lot throughout this 4K, and it just kind of bothered me. So overall, the visuals, I'm sure they're still better than any previous release of this, so it's probably still the best version of Marathon Man that's available to you, but I don't know for sure without having seen it. I just know that it's definitely better than the Blu-ray that's in here, and the audio track is damn good, so you're definitely going to want to hear that. The extras are take them or leave them, nothing really special there. The packaging is pretty standard for Kino Lorber, but I think for the first time ever, I'm going to have to give a Kino Lorber 4K Blu-ray release a failing grade. I'm going to give this a 6 out of 10. I am definitely a little bit disappointed with this. I'm still going to keep it. It's still going in my collection because I'm definitely going to be rewatching this movie in the future. The movie itself is just so solid, and I'm still pretty sure that this is the best version of Marathon Man. That audio track does make it worth it. And you know what? I enjoyed the film enough. I don't want to not have it in my collection, and I want the best version possible. So this is it. I'm going to keep it, and you know what? Hopefully for you guys, if you're a fan of Marathon Man, you want to grab it for 27 bucks. I don't know if I can recommend it at that price, but if it ever drops down to about 20 bucks, maybe they have a sale. Take a look out. I know people have told us that Kino Lorber does have sales, so definitely keep a lookout for that if you want Marathon Man and you're a fan of this movie, because it does have its fans. Definitely keep a lookout for it. If it drops in price, I can recommend it at probably about 20 bucks, $15 to $20 range, but definitely not at the $27 range that it's selling for right now. But if you do by chance want to grab it, we do have an Amazon affiliate link that would help the channel out. So if you do want to buy it and you want to grab it through that link. It costs no extra money for you, and it really does help the channel out. And another thing that helps this channel out is by you liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and we do podcasts now. So search for us at all podcast services, like us there, subscribe to us there, give us a 5-star rating. And then after you're done doing all of that, I want you guys to go out there and run a marathon yourselves, and the whole time you're running those 26 damn miles, I want you to tell everyone that you see, why don't you guys go and subscribe to Let's Talk Entertainment and Media. Anyway, guys, that's it. Have a good one. We'll be seeing you around.